Hello everyone, this is King KZ, and today I want to make another long overdue video about a character who not many people like in the series, being Akainu. Now I'm sure that there's a lot of people who just want to see this guy die, whether it is, versus Luffy, versus Sabo, versus Dragon, versus Rayleigh even, maybe. I know there's a lot of people who don't like him and probably would only like to see him as a kind of matchup because he's strong and nothing more. But today I want to talk about his motivations, how he came to be the way he is and why that is probably important in the story. Now, before I do any of that, I'd like to say that if you haven't already, please subscribe, right? Pushing that little red button goes a long way. So if it's still red on your screen, please do something about that as soon as possible. The other thing I want to say is that if you're not up to date with the One Piece story, then I advise that you check the description down below to see where you should be to watch this video without any spoilers. And without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first question, the most often comment I always see is surrounding Akainu's passion, right? Does this guy care? No, this guy doesn't care about anyone. He doesn't care about anything. And I'd like to say that that is false, right? I think Akainu cares a whole lot. And the perfect quote, the perfect incident is, an unlikely one that you would think of when it comes to Akainu. And that is the Ohara incident. When we meet Akainu there, he says a very famous line. And of course, not many of us always remember the full quote. We only remember the small bit, that talks about if any of the scholars had managed to get on, and that's why he destroyed it. But the full quote goes something like this: if we're going to do it, we do it thoroughly. If any of the scholars had managed to sneak on board, all sacrifices would have been completely wasted. Evil needs to be rooted out. That is the entire little script that he says in that moment. And I think it's important that he says that we need to do it thoroughly, right? In some translations, Akainu's absolute justice is called thorough justice, right? Which means he believes in doing a job all the way to the end. And of course, what makes and shows that this guy has compassion, right, is the fact that he says these sacrifices would have been a waste, right? So he understands what he's doing in sacrificing all the people in Ohara. He understands how devastating it is to call a buster call on an island and destroy it, obliterate it completely. But he thinks that this is a necessary sacrifice to complete and to be just as Marines, to uphold what is right and what is good. Now, what may have driven him to this point is a bit unknown, given his lack of backstory and everything we don't know about him. But I think that it may be one of those things where someone just looks into the dark too long. I mean, there is a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche which says, don't fight monsters lest you become a monster, for as you stare long into the abyss stares back, right? So Akainu's been staring into the dark too long, and it is now reflecting on him and in himself. I think it was Aokiji who also said about Akainu that absolute justice drives a man insane, right? Which is a slight on Akainu's mental being. Yes, it is, but it is not a slight on absolute justice, right? He doesn't say anything bad about absolute justice in himself, which should show us that absolute justice isn't a bad kind of justice. Absolute justice isn't a bad mentality to have as a Marine, right? It means that you believe in doing your job completely. And this leads me to believe that probably in his past, Akainu suffered from incomplete justice or unthorough justice, right? And I could see it being very easily a moment in which, because the Marines were not thorough in defeating pirates, that some pirates who remained over, probably caused Akainu to have a very terrible backstory. And, what could fit better in this story at this point than having, probably remnants of the Rocks pirate group come into Akainu's backstory, affect his past, right? And make that be the way he is, right? The incomplete justice of everything that happened at God Valley is what caused, pirates who survived that to ruin Akainu's childhood. Now, stepping a bit back from talking about just Akainu and his justice and the way he thinks, I think it's important to note that Akainu is really a symbol for the Marines, right? As far as showing that these men act with passion, although the Marines are sometimes in the wrong place, they're always trying to do the right thing, right? This is unlike the world government, which we know is corrupt through and through. And I think a character that shows this difference very well is Rob Lucci, right? And you may think this is a really weird thing, but bear with me, we'll get through it together. Now, think about this. Rob Lucci was introduced first in Water 7. Akainu's first appearance was in Enies Lobby. 2 arcs very near to each other, probably planned at the same time by Oda as part of the story. And so you could almost assume that Oda thought of both Akainu and Rob Lucci at the same time, right? And if there's very many similarities between the two, their belief in justice, that justice needs to be carried out, that those who follow the rules should die, and that those who impede the rules, and justice being carried out should also die, right? Akainu, that's been shown during Marineford and other scenarios. Rob Lucci, it was shown in his past when he was a child that he also believes that those who impede justice should also be punished. And so these characters are very similar and very good to compare because there is one slight difference between the two, right? In Akainu's case, looking back at the Ohara incidents once again, Akainu realizes that what he is doing is a sacrifice for the greater good, right? He realizes that this is a terrible incident, and so what he does comes from a place of compassion. It comes from a place of wanting to improve society, wanting to make everyone safe, better. Everyone should follow the rules. No one is exempt. However, Rob Lucci, even though he is doing the same thing, it comes from a place of loving to be an assassin, right? It comes from a place of, showing and flexing his power over those who are weaker and less than. Although most of the time he will act in line, but really his motivation is not for the greater good of everyone else and everyone around him, or else he would have done things in Enies Lobby a lot more different. And so I think that is the fundamental difference, not only between the two characters, between the Navy and the world government. The Navy, acts on justice. They are very strict. Sometimes they are very cruel as well, but it always comes from a place where they are trying to do better and trying to improve everyone's lives. Whereas we have the world government, who also does cruel things, who also wants people to keep the law, who also paints the picture that they're trying to do the right thing, but it comes from more selfish, self-indulgent reasons, and that's what makes the world government dark and shady at the end of the day. But I think that comparison should also bring home the fact that Akainu is a man of passion, a man of wanting to do what is right, a man who cares. I think that it's not that at this point he doesn't care anymore, but he's more numb to the pain, right? He's more numb to the emotional pain that he causes, to the point where it seems like it doesn't affect him at all. However, I'd like to remind everyone that, look, for the most part, what we've seen of Akainu has been in a war setting, right? You're at war. You act a certain way when you were going to war, right? You don't act the same way when you were chilling, when it's a natural, normal day, nothing going on, right? And I think that when Oda shows, little cover pictures of him cutting the trees, of him relaxing, it seems like he's a very different person. It seems that, when he talks to the Gorosei and, they kind of snap at him and he just shuts up, it seems like he's a very different person. But no, this is the same guy. It's just showing him outside of the war setting when he's more of his normal self, to show that he's not just this hard guy who just only cares about violence, wakes up every day and chooses violence. No, sometimes Akainu wakes up and chooses peace, right? He chooses life. And I think that the more we get to know about Akainu, the more he may be quite an interesting villain that Oda could build up for the end of the story. Coming to the end of this video, I think the last point I want to tackle is whether Akainu will be a villain and whether he will not be a villain at the end of the story. Now, given everything we've seen in the One Piece story, I think it's very clear that Akainu wants to do what is right and uphold the rules, and I think that that's important. But at the same time, I think that depending on the way the story goes, Akainu may not necessarily be a villain at the end, right? He may not be the one, bad guy that everyone wants to die, whether by Sabo or by Luffy, because I believe that he may seize an opportunity. Given how Oda writes, he may find an opportunity to switch sides, and this may be simply based off the fact that, as Doflamingo said during Marineford, It's the winners who decide what justice is, who decide what the law is, right? And if we're taking down the celestial dragons, the Gorosei, and all those guys at the end, then who really runs the world? Is it the leaders at the Reverie? Is it Kong? Is it the Fleet Admiral? Akainu? Is that you? Right? Who really runs the world? Who really sets the rules? Right? And depending on how this is written, Akainu may see this as an opportunity of, right, let's take these old men, these old, stubborn, cruel men out of the way, right? And we can make a better world without these men there. And he may seize that opportunity and side against the world government. But then again, that's all just speculation into how the end of the One Piece story would take place. I just wanted to keep an open mind about that. But guys, this brings me to the end of my video, right? Have I said something you haven't thought about? Have I said something you liked? Have I said something that has really challenged you to think about Akainu a little bit more? Let me know all that down in the comment section below. Please like this video if you like the video and subscribe for more content like this. If you know someone who needs to hear the truth, share this video with them. If you have time, watch one more of my other videos. If not, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end, guys. This is King KZ, and I'll see you in the next one.